panelists, Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Andrew K.P. Liang is a China strategist based in Hong Kong, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow with the Observer Research Foundation, and Dr. Sergei Drvenov is the IDC Russia and Director WHD International Board. Let me start with you, Pinak Chakravarti, because, I think just a few days ago, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Jaishankar, had described the state of the relationship between India and China will depend on the state of the border. And in keeping with that, do you think it was expected that there will be no formal interaction, not even a handshake or photo op exchange between the Chinese president and the Indian Prime Minister? What is the current state of the relationship, given that we've just had this engagement in the fourth location, which is PP15, just days before the SCO Summit began?
Yes, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar did say that. And I think what you're seeing is a reflection of that event in Samarkand, where there is a meeting. I don't think we asked for a meeting. And the Chinese, being Chinese, they say, let the Indians ask for the meeting. So I think we may have got stuck in that thing, ki pehle aap, pehle aap. So that must have happened. And even at the photo op, you mentioned that there was no handshake or they didn't look at each other.
Correct.
I think it was expected, because the border situation is still not gone back to the status quo, which is what we have demanded, and that's what we want. And that it was said that unless that is rectified, the bilateral ties cannot be rectified. So I think that is where we stand. And really there has been no sort of interaction with the Chinese president. So I think this is part of that policy that we are continuing.
Sushant Sareen, one fundamental question that's being asked, of course, SCO has evolved in the last 20 years of its existence. But what are we doing in a grouping which has countries like Turkey? Of course, there was a bilateral that the Prime Minister had with the Turkish president. It has Pakistan and Russia and China, which are now very firmly inimical to the West, to the United States and to Europe. So what is a country like India doing in it? How long can you have one foot in the Quad and one foot in the SCO?
We can do that.
Zaka, we got into the SCO at a time when the world was quite different to what it is right now. When SCO started, it was primarily a security-driven organization. It was focused on things like terrorism and strengthening regional security. And then, the agenda kept expanding. And that was also a time when Russia was part of the G8. China was a very, the American president, the great Barack Obama, the great visionary and all of that, used to talk about a world which was divided between America and China, the G2 formulation. So that was a very different world. And this was a grouping at that point of time, which, we were not averse to getting into. Because we felt that, if there's a regional grouping coming up, it's better to be in it than be out of it. Yeah. And I think because now we are in it, I don't see what is the purpose of coming out of it just yet. But what has happened over the last few years is that because of the kind of positions which the SCO has taken, there have been a number of occasions when the SCO has, or the other SCO members have decided on something, and India has stood out, and India has not been part of that particular understanding which these guys have entered into. So I think it's a kind of a tightrope walk which India is doing by staying on in the SCO. Since it's a regional organization, it does make some sense for us to be in it. Its politics is troublesome. Some of its members are even more troublesome. Yeah. Some of its potential members are going to be even more troublesome. Turkey, for example. Now, Turkey is an avowedly hostile country under Erdogan towards India. It was never exactly the best of friends with India, but under Erdogan, he's taken it to the next level. So yes, we have all kinds of dubious elements as part of SCO. And yes, going forward, I think we will have to try and balance out our involvement with the Quad and with our Western partners. With whatever little comes our way as far as an organization like the SCO is concerned.
Shaina NC is also joining us. Shaina, I think, Sushant, just as you were joining this broadcast, made a very valid point. We got into the SCO at a time when the global architecture was very different. Today, the global architecture is very, very different. Russia and the United States are at loggerheads. We have our own differences with China. And today, Prime Minister met the Turkish president. Of course, no one's saying you should not have bilateral engagements, but we know that Turkey has been inimical to our interests in the past. So how does one continue to do this balancing act? Because it's like you're having two legs and two boats. At some point, you're going to trip and fall.
So, Zaka, I just want to say that what actually is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? I mean, you look at the historic kind of influence, which obviously your other panelists have spoken about. I only want to say just to understand that the South and Central Asia issues and India's role in it currently, vis-a-vis, be it our neighbors, be it the influence of China, all of that is very, very important. And do understand, different prime ministers have played geopolitics very differently, but the prime minister, our prime minister, Narendra Modi ji, is in a commanding position when it comes to any decision which is taken in the larger interest of India. And the times are gone where India used to walk behind. So I think that our kind of major regional security issues need to be addressed. We need to have certain answers. Energy supply is a big question. Investment is always a matter of interest. So obviously, if we are part of this dialogue and discussion, only then will we have answers to the more serious questions that are relevant to India. But I do want to say that our country proud of Prime Minister, as is the world diaspora. And whenever you have engaging, be it trade, be it energy, be it investment, people have viewed India as a serious player. And that's not necessarily the case with places like Pakistan or even China for its doublespeak or its million colors of revolution. So I think that the results will be welcomed. And we are in safe hands, so just let's leave it at that.
Andrew K.P. Leung is joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew Leung, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping of China have met, I think, 18 times in the last 8 years. This would have been the first time that they would have met since the Galwan clashes of 2020, and this was an opportunity for a meeting to sit across the table and figure out, what are each other's positions. And clearly, the fact that that meeting did not happen, that's on China, because China is the one that changed the status quo. Out of the 6 places where they changed the status quo, in 4, there has been disengagement that has happened, but 2 are still outstanding. And as the External Affairs Minister said a few days ago, the relationship cannot be normal until the border becomes normal. And that is entirely on China, not on India.
Well, I don't think the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a forum designed to solve bilateral problems. This particular meeting of the SCO is unlike any others because it comes at a time when the whole world order is changing fast. I mean, look at the war in Ukraine. For example, India is not exactly on the same page as the United States. It's trying to formulate a more constructive relationship with Russia. And if you look at the SCO, there are other members wanting to join, including Iran and various others. And the SCO is only one of other groupings in the developing world, like the so-called BRICS plus. Plus means plus African countries, other African countries, plus Afghanistan, and plus the Middle East and UAE and so on and so forth. Now, what does all these signify? It signifies that a complete shift in the whole world global order, an order no longer dictated at all times by the United States. In other words, a lot of the developing countries do not want to be at the beck and call of the United States, and they want to reclaim their sovereignty. They want to look at their own national interests, and we're living in a more